The Zirak Dominion had conquered over 100 planets. No species had ever resisted them successfully. Their empires stretched across the galaxy, their technology unmatched, their warriors feared. When their fleet reached Earth, they expected another easy victory. Humanity had fought among themselves for centuries, their weapons primitive compared to Zirak war machines. The Zirak were prepared for resistance, ready to crush any opposition. But instead, they found nothing. The invasion fleet landed without a single shot fired. Cities stood silent, untouched. Buildings were intact, streets were empty, and power grids hummed with energy, yet not a single human was in sight. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the entire species had simply vanished overnight. Overlord Vraxis, leader of the invasion, stood in the ruins of New York City, staring at the quiet skyline. His second-in-command, General Karish, stepped forward, confusion on his reptilian face. "This isn't possible," Karish said. "Where is the enemy?" Vraxis scanned the area. The data coming in was baffling. Earth's satellites were still operational. The internet was still active. Automated systems were still running. But human life signs, non-existent. The cowards must have fled, Vraxis growled. Perhaps they knew they could not win and abandoned their planet. Karish seemed doubtful but said nothing. He gave the order for troops to spread out and secure the cities. Soon, thousands of Zirak soldiers flooded the streets of Earth's greatest civilizations: London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing. They took control of military bases, expecting hidden human resistance, but there was none. The mighty armies of Earth had disappeared. Vraxis smirked. "Pathetic creatures," he muttered. He sent a message to the Zirak High Command. "Earth has fallen without a fight. The humans have abandoned their world. The Zirak Dominion claims this planet as its own." As he stood atop a ruined skyscraper, watching his soldiers march through the city, he felt a surge of triumph. Another victory, another world added to the empire. Then the reports started coming in. At first, they were minor. A patrol squad in Washington, D.C. had gone missing. Their comms had gone silent, and when reinforcements arrived, there was no sign of them. No bodies, no weapons, just an abandoned vehicle and the eerie silence of an empty city. More reports followed. In Paris, an entire Zirak outpost failed to check in. Drones sent to investigate found their equipment still running, their food untouched, but not a single soldier remained. In Tokyo, security cameras caught something unusual. A patrol unit had been guarding a research lab. The footage showed them standing at their posts, until the camera glitched. For a brief second, the screen went dark. When it came back, the soldiers were gone. Their weapons lay on the ground where they had stood, their armor still intact, but they had vanished. Vraxis dismissed it at first. "Technical malfunctions," he said. "The human technology must be interfering with our systems." But then the fear started spreading among his troops. Zirak warriors were some of the strongest in the universe. They did not fear battle. But now, they were afraid of the silence. They whispered among themselves about the disappearances, about the shadows that moved just out of sight. Soldiers refused to patrol alone. They kept their weapons raised at all times, watching the darkness as if something unseen was watching them back. Karish brought more disturbing news. "Our scanners detect no human life. But there is something," he said. "Something is moving. Not life forms, but energy signatures, strange distortions in the air. They come and go too quickly for us to track." Vraxis felt an uneasy sensation crawl down his spine. "What do you mean?" Karish hesitated. "I don't know, but something is here, something we cannot see." That night, the Zirak fortress in Berlin went silent. It was the largest command center on Earth, housing hundreds of soldiers and equipment. But as the sun rose, there was no communication, no alarms, no distress calls. When a squad arrived to investigate, they found the fortress empty. Bloodstains covered the walls. Weapons lay scattered on the floor, and carved into the metal doors, deep claw-like marks formed words written in the human language. "We are here." Vraxis stared at the message, his claws tightening. His forces were the most advanced in the galaxy. They had destroyed entire civilizations, and yet something on this planet was hunting them. And then the first voice came through the comms. A chilling human voice, crackling through every Zurich communicator at once. It was impossible. There was no trace of human signals anywhere. Yet the voice spoke clearly, as if whispering directly into their minds. "You wanted our planet." A pause. "Come and take it." Then silence. Panic spread like wildfire. Zurich soldiers no longer marched with confidence. They huddled together in groups, watching the empty streets. Some fired their weapons at shadows, convinced something was there. But there was nothing. Or at least, nothing they could see. Vraxis clenched his fists. He would not let fear control his army. The Zurich Dominion did not fear ghosts. They had crushed every enemy they had ever faced, and this would be no different. "Deploy the scanners," he ordered. "Sweep every inch of this planet. I want answers." The scanners were deployed, powerful enough to detect the faintest traces of life. But the results were worse than they expected. There were no bodies, no human corpses anywhere. It was as if the entire species had never existed. But the scanners did pick up something else. Faint, unnatural movements, flickering distortions in the air, shifting patterns that defied logic. Something was watching them. And then the attacks began. It started with isolated incidents. A squad stationed outside a military bunker reported hearing whispers. Moments later, their comms cut out. When reinforcements arrived, all that was left was their abandoned weapons, still warm from use. Then it escalated. In Los Angeles, Zurich battleships lost control, their engines shutting down mid-flight. They crashed into buildings, exploding on impact. No enemy fire had been detected. In Moscow, entire battalions were wiped out, their bodies found frozen in place, eyes wide with terror, as if they had seen something so horrifying that their minds had shattered. The Zurich war machine was breaking. And in the ruins of London, a single transmission was intercepted, looping over and over from an unknown source. A whispering, human voice. "You shouldn't have come." Vraxis had faced many enemies in his lifetime. He had seen planets burn, species wiped from existence. But this was different. This was not war. This was a nightmare. And for the first time in his life, Overlord Vraxis felt something he had never felt before. Fear. The silence was worse than any battle Overlord Vraxis had ever fought. It was a suffocating, unnatural quiet that pressed down on his army like an invisible weight. The streets of Earth's cities had become graveyards, empty and cold. His warriors no longer marched in formation. They huddled together, moving cautiously, weapons raised at all times. They were the invaders, the conquerors of 100 worlds. Yet here they were, hunted like prey. His generals assured him that the enemy could not hide forever. Scanners swept through every structure, searching for any trace of human life, but they found nothing. Vraxis did not believe in ghosts, yet his army was disappearing one soldier at a time, and not a single body had been recovered. The whispers in their comms had stopped, but that only made things worse. Before, the enemy had taunted them. Now, it was as if the humans had grown tired of playing games. And then the attacks began. A Zurich patrol unit, 12 of their finest warriors, was sent to secure a military bunker deep in the mountains. The team was experienced, each soldier clad in impenetrable battle armor, their weapons capable of vaporizing steel. They moved in formation, scanning every shadow, every dark corner. The bunker was quiet, abandoned, just like everything else on this cursed planet. Then the lights flickered. A sharp burst of static exploded in their comms, followed by a high-pitched, piercing screech that made every soldier clutch their heads in agony. The sound vanished as quickly as it came. When they recovered, the squad leader checked on his team. Two of them were gone. No screams, no gunfire, no struggle. Their weapons lay on the floor, still warm. The air was thick with tension. The remaining soldiers tightened their grip on their rifles, their breathing heavy. Then the lights flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, something moved. One of them fired blindly. The plasma bolt hit the wall, leaving a smoking crater. The team spread out, forming a defensive circle. Their helmets detected nothing. No life signs, no movement, nothing except the rapid beating of their own hearts. Then they heard it. A breath. It came from right behind them. The squad leader spun around just in time to see a shape emerging from the darkness, its outline barely visible against the air itself. It was not a shadow, not a trick of the light. Something was phasing in and out of reality. Before he could react, the thing struck. A blade, impossibly sharp, sliced through his armor like paper. His vision blurred, and the last thing he saw before the world faded to black was the faint, glowing outline of a human soldier in advanced, ghost-like armor. The rest of the squad opened fire, their weapons lighting up the bunker. But they were not shooting at an enemy. They were shooting at empty air. The humans had vanished, leaving nothing behind but the echoes of their first strike. Vraxis received the report, but there was no footage, no survivors, no proof of an enemy. Just a transmission, one that played on every Xeric screen across the planet. A grainy video, flickering and distorted. It showed a group of Xerac soldiers standing in formation, their weapons drawn. Then, without warning, they were ripped apart by invisible forces. Their bodies lifted off the ground, slammed against walls, torn from reality itself. Their screams echoed in the silence before the screen went black. Then, a single sentence appeared. "This is not your world." Panic spread like wildfire. Xerac warships hovered over Earth's major cities, scanning for human energy signatures. Every street, every building was swept, yet they found nothing. The humans were nowhere. And yet, they were everywhere. Hours later, a second attack came. This time, it was not silent. A Xerac supply convoy was moving through the ruins of Chicago, transporting weapons and rations. The convoy was heavily guarded, with armored vehicles and aerial drones patrolling the skies. The Xerac were cautious, scanning every possible hiding spot. But they were looking in the wrong places. The attack came from above. From the rooftops, from the shadows, from the very air itself, humans descended like wraiths. Cloaked figures dropped from the sky, landing silently among the soldiers. The Xerac barely had time to react before the first explosions erupted. Drones in the sky malfunctioned, spiraling out of control before crashing into the streets. The armored vehicles were hit by EMP blasts, shutting down their engines in an instant. And the soldiers, they never stood a chance. Vraxis watched through a live drone feed as his troops were slaughtered. The humans moved like ghosts, appearing and disappearing between blinks. They weaved through the Xerac formations, their weapons silent and precise. Some carried blades that phased through armor, cutting through even the strongest Xerac defenses. Others used shock rifles, stunning their enemies before dragging them into the darkness. In less than 3 minutes, the entire convoy was wiped out. The last surviving Xerac soldier, wounded and crawling for his weapon, looked up just in time to see a figure standing over him. The human's face was hidden behind a smooth, reflective helmet. No expression, no emotion. Then, a single shot. The screen went black. The Xerac High Command demanded an explanation. How could a species they had already defeated be fighting back with such precision? How had they developed this impossible technology? Vraxis had no answers. He could only watch as his army was torn apart by an enemy that did not exist. Fear crept into the ranks. Soldiers refused to patrol at night. Commanders locked themselves in heavily guarded fortresses, yet even those were not safe. In Berlin, an entire command center vanished overnight. Hundreds of Xerac troops gone, their weapons and armor left behind, as if they had simply dissolved into thin air. And then the most terrifying attack came. A Zirak warship, orbiting Earth, was hit by an unknown force. The ship's captain reported phantom readings, energy spikes that did not match any known signature. Then, one by one, the crew started vanishing. Security footage captured the horror. Zirak engineers working at their stations blinked out of existence in the middle of their tasks. Officers disappeared in mid-sentence. Weapons refused to fire. Systems shut down. The captain's final transmission was garbled with static, but his last words were clear. "They're already on the ship." Then the warship fell from the sky, crashing into the Atlantic Ocean. Vraxis stood in the heart of his command center, watching the flames consume the remains of his once mighty fleet. He clenched his fists, rage boiling inside him. This was not possible. The Zirak were conquerors. They had wiped out entire civilizations. They had technology beyond imagination. Yet here they were, being hunted like vermin in the dark. And then the final message came. A voice. Calm, cold, human. "You should have left when you had the chance." The transmission cut off. The silence returned. But this time, it was not the silence of an empty world. It was the silence of something waiting to strike again. Vraxis stood in the heart of his command center, staring at the reports scattered across his desk. They'd made no sense. His forces were the most advanced in the galaxy, trained to crush entire civilizations in days, and yet they were being wiped out by an enemy that did not even appear on their scanners. The humans were supposed to be gone. Their world had been empty when the Zirak arrived. No armies, no resistance, no life signs. And now his soldiers were vanishing in the night, slaughtered by ghosts. He replayed the latest transmission, captured from a security drone before it was destroyed. The video was grainy, filled with static, but the images were enough to make his blood run cold. A squad of Zirak warriors patrolled the ruins of an Earth city, their rifles scanning every shadow. Then, one by one, they disappeared. Not in an explosion, not in a firefight. They were simply erased from existence. Their armor and weapons clattered to the ground, but their bodies were gone. The video flickered. For a brief moment, something appeared, a faint shimmer, a distortion in the air, barely visible. Then, a single human figure emerged from nothingness. The figure was clad in sleek, black armor that seemed to shift like liquid. The helmet was smooth, featureless, reflecting the city lights like a mirror. A ghost soldier. The humans had not vanished. They had hidden themselves. Vraxis clenched his fists. They were waiting for us. The Zirak had taken over Earth easily because the humans had let them. They had not run. They had not fooled into space. They had gone invisible. Now, they were fighting back. The ghost soldiers were unlike anything the Zirak had ever faced. They did not fight like traditional armies. They did not march in formation or engage in open combat. They were shadows, striking from nowhere and disappearing before the enemy could react. Their technology was beyond anything the Zirak had encountered. Their cloaking devices were perfect, not just bending light, but erasing their presence entirely. No heat signatures, no sound, no electronic signals. Even the Zirak's most advanced scanners detected nothing until it was too late. The attacks intensified. In Beijing, an entire Zirak communications hub was destroyed in under 5 minutes. Security footage showed only flickering lights, distorted air, and the screams of soldiers before the feed cut to black. In Paris, a battalion of Zirak enforcers was moving through the streets when they were ambushed from every direction at once. Their own weapons turned against them, their own armor used as traps. The ghost soldiers never revealed themselves fully. Just flashes of movement, the gleam of a blade, the reflection of their helmets in shattered glass. In Los Angeles, a high-ranking Zirak commander was found dead in his own war room. The doors had never been breached. The security codes had not been tampered with. And yet, the message was clear. the humans could reach them anywhere. Fear spread through the Zirek ranks. Soldiers refused to go out at night. Some even abandoned their posts and fled to their ships, desperate to leave this cursed world. But even space was not safe. A Zirek war cruiser in low orbit was preparing to launch when the bridge crew vanished. Their bodies were never found. The ship, now under human control, turned its weapons on the other Zirek ships before activating stealth mode and disappearing into the void. Vraxis slammed his fists on the table. How did they develop this technology? No species had ever possessed cloaking this advanced, not even the Zirek Dominion. Yet humans, primitive, warlike humans, had built the most perfect stealth warfare system in the galaxy, and they had waited for the Zirek to take Earth, knowing they would come. Karish, his second-in-command, spoke carefully. It is possible. They have been preparing for this war for years. Vraxis turned sharply. Explain. Karish hesitated. We know humans have fought among themselves for centuries, but their wars were always brutal, unpredictable. They never relied on numbers or superior firepower. They always focused on strategy and adaptation. What if, instead of building massive fleets, they focused on disappearing? What if they turned themselves into the perfect ambush predators? The thought sent a chill through Vraxis. He had underestimated them. The entire Zirek Dominion had. They had assumed humans were weak because they lacked massive war fleets and advanced battleships. But the truth was far worse. Humans had built a new kind of army, one that could not be detected, one that could not be stopped, one that was now hunting them. And then the final blow came. A distress signal from the Zirek Central Command Base in New York. It was their strongest fortress on Earth, heavily shielded, protected by thousands of soldiers. By the time Vraxis received the call, it was already too late. Security feeds showed the impossible. The doors to the command center opened without being touched. Guard towers powered down, one after another. Then, one by one, the soldiers collapsed. Not from gunfire, not from an explosion. Their bodies simply fell where they stood, eyes wide with terror, as if they had seen something their minds could not comprehend. Vraxis watched in horror as shadows moved through the base. Figures flickered in and out of visibility, ghost-like soldiers in liquid black armor. They moved with terrifying speed, cutting through the last defenders with blades that shimmered like glass. Then, the feed cut to a single live transmission. A human soldier stood in the command center, staring directly into the camera. His helmet was smooth and unreadable, but when he spoke, his voice was filled with cold certainty. You lost the moment you landed. The screen went black. A second later, the entire command base exploded. The shockwave rattled the Zirek ships in orbit. The humans had taken back one of their largest cities, and they had done it without losing a single soldier. Vraxis felt something he had never felt before. True, pure fear. The Zirek had conquered countless species. They had crushed entire worlds. But they had never faced anything like this. This was not war. This was a trap. A trap the humans had set long before the Zirek even arrived. And now, the hunters had become the hunted. Vraxis stood motionless, his claws digging into the metal railing as he overlooked the burning ruins of his forces on the central command screen. The situation had spiraled out of control. This was no longer an occupation. This was a massacre. His soldiers, the once feared warriors of the Zirek Dominion, were being hunted across the planet, their numbers dwindling by the hour. They had superior technology, better weapons, and complete planetary control. None of it mattered. Earth was supposed to be an easy conquest, a dead world ripe for the taking. And yet, the humans, those stubborn, unpredictable creatures, had turned it into a trap. The ghost soldiers had been a whisper of death, a force that struck from the shadows. But now, they were no longer hiding. The humans had decided to fight in the open, and the war had turned into something far worse than Vraxis had imagined. The first sign came in the form of a falling warship. Above the planet, Zyrek cruisers still held control of the skies. Or so they thought. The massive flagship orbiting Earth, the pride of Dominion, suddenly lost control. Its engines exploded from within, its shields collapsed, and its communication systems shut down. The last transmission from the crew was a single chilling message. They're inside. Seconds later, the warship plunged from orbit, its massive form burning through the atmosphere like a meteor. The impact leveled an entire city, sending a shockwave across the continent. But the humans didn't stop there. They had tasted blood, and now they were coming for everything. Zyrek outposts across the planet were wiped out overnight. No alarms, no distress calls, just silence, and then nothing. Bases were erased, leaving only smoking craters. Supply lines were cut, leaving thousands of Zyrek soldiers stranded with no reinforcements. The once dominant invaders were being isolated, cut off from each other, unable to regroup. And then came the open battles. The humans had fought in the shadows for weeks. Now, they'd walk the battlefield without fear. Cloaked warriors unveiled themselves, revealing their advanced exosuits, their silent plasma weapons, their impossible speed. A battle erupted in the ruins of Moscow. Zyrek battalions, heavily armed and armored, were deployed to secure the city. It was supposed to be an overwhelming show of force. Instead, it was a massacre. The first shot came from nowhere. A single plasma round, a perfect headshot, and the Zyrek commander collapsed before he could even give an order. Then, the ghost soldiers attacked. They moved like phantoms, appearing and disappearing in an instant. Their armor bent light itself, making them almost impossible to track. One moment, they were in front of the enemy. The next, they were behind them, cutting through Zyrek defenses with razor-sharp energy blades. A Zyrek tank lined up its cannon, but before it could fire, the entire crew inside was already dead. The hatch opened from within, and a human soldier emerged, his reflective visor stained with alien blood. The battle lasted 6 minutes. When it was over, the Zyrek forces were completely annihilated. Not a single human body was left behind. Not because they had died, because not a single one of them had fallen. Vraxis could no longer deny the truth. The humans had outplayed them. They had prepared for this war in ways the Zyrek could never have imagined. They had let the invasion happen. They had let the Zyrek feel victorious. And then, when the enemy was comfortable, when they believed Earth was theirs, the real war had begun. More reports flooded in. London fell. The Zyrek fortress, once thought impenetrable, was breached from within. Security footage showed the commanders executing their own soldiers, driven mad by an invisible enemy they could not comprehend. Tokyo was taken overnight. Surveillance drones captured nothing but empty streets. When Zyrek reinforcements arrived, they found their entire garrison gone. Not dead. Gone. The Arctic bases, where Zyrek officers had retreated for safety, were erased from existence. And then the humans sent their final message. A broadcast hijacked every Zyrek screen. A single human stood in the darkness, his helmet reflecting the burning cities behind him. He spoke only one sentence. "You never conquered Earth. You only walked into your own grave." Vraxis could not contain his rage. He turned to his officers. "We will burn this planet to ash." The Zyrek still had weapons. They still had warships in orbit. If they could not rule this world, they would destroy it. The order was given. Orbital bombardment. From above, the Zyrek fleet began their final attack. Plasma cannons charged, targeting every major city, every human stronghold. The sky glowed red, the planet below about to be turned into molten rock. And then, nothing happened. The weapons failed. The ship's power shut down. Their systems were no longer under Zyrek control. One by one, the warships turned against each other. Their targeting systems were hacked. Their weapons turned inward. The Zyrek fired upon themselves, helpless to stop it. And then the human fleet arrived. They had stolen Zirac ships. They had rewired their technology. They had taken the invaders' own weapons and made them their own. The sky burned, not with human cities, but with Zirac warships, falling like fire. Vraxis staggered back. He had never feared death, never believed in defeat. But now, as he watched his empire crumble, as he saw his once mighty fleet destroyed by the very species he had underestimated, he understood what was coming. This was no longer a battle for Earth. This was a warning to the galaxy. Humanity had never been weak. They had been waiting. And now, they were coming for revenge. Vraxis had never known fear before. The Zirac Dominion had conquered countless worlds, crushed rebellions, and wiped entire species from existence. But now, standing in the ruins of his once mighty command center, he felt something alien crawl into his bones. Helplessness. His forces were being hunted. His warships were being turned against him. His once loyal soldiers were fleeing, abandoning their posts in a desperate bid for survival. The humans, those primitive, weak creatures, had proven to be something far worse than he had ever imagined. They were monsters. Every attempt to regain control had failed. The Zirac were supposed to have the superior fleet, the stronger army, the more advanced technology. And yet it was the humans who dictated every battle, the humans who decided who lived and who died. The fortress city of Berlin had been his last stronghold, a bastion of Zirac power. Now it was a graveyard. The towering walls were crumbling, the defenses silent, the once mighty war machines abandoned. The few Zirac left inside had gathered in the central command tower, desperate for orders, desperate for hope. But there was none. A loud, static-filled transmission crackled over the main speakers. Vraxis. It was a human voice, cold, unshaken. You have nowhere left to run. Outside the city, shadows moved in the ruins. No matter how advanced their scanners were, they picked up nothing. The ghost soldiers were here, watching, waiting, closing in. Vraxis clenched his claws. He could not let it end like this. He turned to his remaining officers, their faces filled with the same grim realization. They were not going to win. "Prepare the escape ships," he growled. His officers hesitated. They had never run from a battle before. The Zirac Dominion did not retreat. But this was not a battle. This was an extermination. The last warships still in orbit had already begun their descent. The few remaining high-ranking Zirac leaders were abandoning the planet. They would leave Earth behind, retreat to the Dominion. And what? Vraxis knew the truth. The Zirac Dominion would never recover from this. The humans had turned their entire strategy against them. They had taken Zirac warships. They had infiltrated their networks. They had turned every victory into a carefully laid trap. The moment the Zirac had landed, they had already lost. The escape plan was simple. Use the remaining warships to blast a path through the human-controlled fleet and retreat into hyperspace before the humans could track them. It was a desperate move, but it was the only move left. As the remaining Zirac forces scrambled to the launch pads, the air grew silent. Too silent. A shiver ran down Vraxis' spine. And then the attack began. From every direction, the humans struck. Not with brute force, not with massive armies, but with surgical precision. The Zirac never saw them coming. One by one, the defense turrets failed. The targeting systems were hijacked. Ships exploded on their own launch pads, their crews slaughtered before they even boarded. Zirac soldiers fired wildly into the night, trying to hit an enemy they could not see. They might as well have been shooting at ghosts. Vraxis ran, not out of fear, but because he had to survive. He had to warn the Dominion, had to tell them the truth. Humanity was not just fighting for Earth. They were coming for the entire galaxy. He reached the last escape ship, his guards forming a tight perimeter around him. The launch sequence was activated. The engines roared to life. The ship lifted off. For a moment, hope flickered in his chest. Then the alarms blared. System failure. The escape ship lurched in the air, its controls suddenly unresponsive. The Zirac pilots screamed in confusion. The ship was still rising, but it was no longer under their control. Vraxis turned to the screens. The human symbol had hijacked the interface. And then, a new transmission. A human soldier appeared on the monitor, his helmet reflecting the burning city below. His voice was calm, almost emotionless. "Running won't save you." Vraxis's heart pounded. The ship, still ascending, suddenly flipped upside down. And then, it plunged straight back down. Vraxis roared in defiance. His claws slashed at the controls, but nothing responded. The humans were in full control, and they had already decided his fate. The ship crashed into the heart of the Zirac fortress, the explosion erasing the last remnants of the invaders. The battle for Earth was over. The Zirac had come as conquerors. Now, they were nothing more than a warning to anyone who dared underestimate humanity. The broadcast echoed across the stars. Every major power in the galaxy received the signal at once. The ruling councils of countless empires, the warlords of distant sectors, the mercenary clans lurking in the void, all of them stopped and watched. The footage was raw, unfiltered. The once mighty Zirac Dominion, a force that had crushed hundreds of civilizations, was gone. Their warships, once feared across the cosmos, burned in Earth's orbit. Their armies, who had marched across countless worlds, were now corpses rotting in the streets. The message was clear. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not broken. Humanity had never been conquered, only underestimated. A single human soldier stood in the final transmission. His helmet visor reflected the smoldering ruins of the Zirac's last command center. He spoke calmly, his voice carrying across the stars. "The Zirac Dominion came to take our world." The camera panned across the wreckage. Zirac warships, shattered and burning in the night sky. Their own weapons, their own technology, turned against them. They thought we were weak. The screen flashed images of the ghost soldiers in action, impossible speed, cloaked armor, brutal efficiency. Zirac soldiers being taken out before they could even scream. Entire battalions wiped out without a single human casualty. They thought we would fall. Another image. The Zirac flagship plummeting from orbit, torn apart from the inside. Now, they no longer exist. The soldier stepped forward, staring directly into the camera. His voice dropped lower, and his final words sent a chill through every species watching. "Let this be a lesson." The feed cut out. For a long time, no one in the galaxy spoke. The Zirac Dominion was one of the most powerful empires in the known universe. Their fleets had crushed rebellions with ease. Their technology had been centuries ahead of most species, and yet humans had destroyed them in weeks. Panic spread across the stars. The High Council of the Velthar Union, longtime rivals of the Zirac, held an emergency meeting. What if humanity wasn't finished? What if this was just the beginning? The Krivta Collective, a race of warlike insectoids, had once considered raiding human colonies. Now they erased every plan related to Earth. The trade lords of the Orion Reach, who had once mocked humanity for their lack of interstellar power, immediately sent envoys to negotiate peace treaties. Even the Verac Enclave, a reclusive and ancient species that had witnessed countless wars, sent out a single message to their people: "Do not provoke Earth." The universe had learned the truth. Humanity had not been fighting for survival. They had been preparing. For years, they had studied their enemies. They had let the Zirac invade, let them believe they had won, only to turn the entire war against them. No species had ever fought like this before. No species had ever been so patient, so ruthless, so terrifyingly effective. And now, they were watching. The remnants of the Zirac, the few survivors who had escaped into deep space, sent out desperate distress signals. No one answered. No empire wanted to be associated with them. No faction wanted to invite humanity's wrath. The Zirak Dominion was officially declared dead. Their homeworld, once a thriving capital of war and conquest, was left undefended. Pirate fleets descended upon it like vultures, tearing apart everything the Zirak had built over centuries. No one came to help them. Their name was erased from galactic maps. Their empire, their fleets, their people, forgotten. And humanity. Humanity was silent. They did not expand their territory. They did not demand power or tribute. They simply watched. And that, more than anything, terrified the galaxy. Because if humans had wiped out the Zirak with such terrifying precision, what would happen to the next empire that made the mistake of underestimating them?